The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is the post-Summerslam edition of the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. And what an eventful SummerSlam. It was certainly a very interesting event with a lot of stuff going on and a lot of title changes, a lot of storylines that appear to be heading in different directions, but certainly not boring in the least. A very entertaining 4-hour premium live event tonight from World Wrestling Entertainment, and we are here to break it all down tonight, as we typically do after these big PLE events. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. Biggest party of the summer, and man, did we get some title changes? Did we get some plot development and some of the big storylines? It was an event.
It was certainly a big event, so we will be breaking that down tonight. And Chris, who is on the road this week, not joining us on the podcast, but we do have to shout out the fact that he was the winner in the picks tonight. And congratulations to Chris. He's certainly been touting his win on our Discord, so congratulations.
Well earned.
Well earned. A wild event for sure. Rachel on the road as well this week, and so she's not joining us. So it's just Mike and I this week talking about all things professional wrestling and all things SummerSlam. We're also going to spend just a few minutes in the middle of our program kind of talking a little bit about the NXT TNA talent exchange, if for lack of a better term, that has kind of started. Something has been very interesting to us, so we'll be just talking about that a little bit after our middle break. But let's get right to SummerSlam, and we'll start with the main event. Contested under Bloodline rules because, of course, it was Cody Rhodes against Solo Sikoa, and in the end, it was Cody Rhodes getting the win in 29 minutes and 15 seconds after his good buddy Roman Reigns showed up after all the Bloodline nonsense and everybody interfered, and Jacob Fatu got taken out after hitting a table and with a splash, and he supposedly got hurt. And I guess
the table took him out.
Yes, the table took him out. But as it looked like Solo maybe was set to finish off Cody, Roman's music played, and the place went absolutely nuts. And then, of course, he comes in and hits a Superman punch and a spear on Solo and kind of gives the nod of approval to Cody and leaves. Cody hits Crossroads and gets the 1-2-3 for the win. A lot to unpack here. First off, great to see Arn Anderson back in WWE, at least, if not full-time, certainly able to make this guest appearance as Cody's coach, kind of reprising his role from AEW. That was great to see. Great to see Pharaoh in his final road appearance kind of get to walk Cody out. It was a little weird that Arn it seemed to me, was suggesting people were coming in from outside of WWE, and it was Kevin Owens and Randy Orton and then eventually Roman Reigns. Although maybe Arn Anderson called Paul Heyman, who called Roman Reigns, and that's how that worked. We'll find out probably.
I don't know if it was if he meant different locker rooms like people from Raw.
I could be. I don't know. But
that's the only thing I can assume.
But it was great to see Arn for sure, and I think, he's walking into a much different company as well than the one he left because he was kind of disgruntled that there really wasn't anybody listening to him. Then he goes to AEW and kind of falls into the same situation. But
people are nicer to him probably, but they still weren't listening to him.
Very true. But I think he's found a better situation if he has come back to WWE, even if it's just on an occasional basis. But Cody gets the win, which I think most people probably expected. Solo Sikoa certainly had a good showing. The problem with the match for me, and then I'll get your thoughts on it, is when you have Bloodline rules, everybody knows what that means. So when you have like a 15-minute match before Bloodline rules happens, then everybody just kind of sits around and waits for that to start, and then the crowd was great after that. But it was just kind of like, okay, it's kind of like War Games, where it's like until that last guy gets in the ring, nobody's going to win this match. Like until somebody comes out and attacks, like we're just kind of sitting here waiting for it all to happen.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like I understand trepidation in the Punk McIntyre match as far as cheating goes, because the way that match was built, you didn't really know what Rollins was going to call or not. But this one was specifically no disqualification. Like I don't understand why you don't come out totally guns a-blazing. The Bloodline should come out together. With weapons, like a shopping cart full of them. It's almost like, we'll cheat eventually. That's a really strange method to go about doing a no DQ match to me.
Why didn't Arn Anderson hand him the Glock?
That's what I don't understand.
I mean, we could have taken care of this, but like I understand it from a wrestling logic standpoint. I don't understand it from a logic standpoint because again, like why would you not just bring the whole group out there at once? Especially if Arn's wording was true that these guys are traveling. Maybe they're not here yet. Maybe they're just getting to Cleveland. So maybe
never know.
You might want to go ahead and just get the cheating out of the way in the first 5 minutes, and maybe you go ahead and finish Cody off. But that aside, what a pop for Roman Reigns. I think everybody knew that was going to happen, but Triple H has succeeded, and everybody who's had input on this Bloodline storyline, with maybe the exception of The Rock, everybody who who's actually been in it for the story has succeeded in making Roman Reigns the biggest babyface in the company, where Vince McMahon couldn't do that. And that, again, it should be a lesson for Vince McMahon, should be a lesson for Tony Khan. If you get the storytelling right, it's about the story. It's not about the matches. And they got the story with Roman right, where it's made total sense. And because of that, you get the big payoff tonight.
Nobody likes being told this is the guy you're going to root for, and you have to root for him. There are no other options. The second and I guess in some weird backhanded way, some credit does go to Vince McMahon, because it was because of that allowed Reigns to become such a monster heel ultimately, because that was really how you viewed the guy.
Yeah.
And within this Bloodline story, they built him into such a massive, ridiculous heel that you couldn't help but start to like him.
Yeah.
And, it was bound to happen eventually that this whole thing was going to come to an end for him. He was going to lose. And you can't help but want to root for him now, just out of respect for what he was able to do for the past few years.
Well, and let's not forget what Paul Heyman did. Paul Heyman willing to take that bump to basically cement Roman being the babyface when he came back, when Paul said, I will not acknowledge you as my tribal chief. That was kind of like the last nail in the coffin in the story that basically, if there was any doubts how Roman was coming back, that basically set it up. He's coming back to avenge Paul Heyman, to set things right, to put these people that are outsiders in their place. And
I think even you mentioned it after SmackDown, was that even Cody alluded to the fact that Roman Reigns was the real tribal chief. So even at that point in time, you finally have Cody acknowledging him within this feud with Solo Sikoa. So it just kind of set the stage for Reigns to show up and kind of reciprocate that respect.
Yeah, without a doubt. And obviously, we are back in the first inning of whatever the new Bloodline story is going to be, because Paul Heyman's going to come back at some point, so we'll get his explanation on everything. We'll maybe find out that Arn picked up the phone and called him. Presumably, the Usos are going to eventually side with Reigns again. But again, in this modern storytelling era of WWE, I don't think they're just going to come back. There's going to have to be some sort of legitimate reconciliation, because Roman Reigns gaslit those dudes for like 3 years. Like, you don't just come back and say, "Oh, we're all, we're forgiven." There's going to have to be some fences mended there, and then we've still got Hikuleo, Tala Tonga, whatever his name's going to be, who's waiting to debut.
Any number of other Samoans that have not signed, that are still out there,
and of course, The Rock
around. The Rock, certainly.
The Rock is that final boss that's going to come back and presumably set up some sort of War Games match for the folks of Vancouver, and those tickets are going to be hot because they announced that was going to happen. So.
But I think that's a difference in booking style. When you mention that there's going to have to be this mending of the fences, I think the creative that's in place now sees that as, well, that's at least 6 weeks of programming we have set up.
Yeah,
you see it as a positive and not like, just put them back together, no one cares anyway, which is kind of how you felt the old storytelling worked.
And that's why, I even made the comment today, like everybody was just assuming Roman was coming back tonight, but in the modern WWE, it's like, well, what if Solo wins? And the odds are just too much for Cody to overcome, and Solo wins, or Hikuleo debuts, and that's the thing that pushed him over the edge. And then Roman sitting at home decides, okay, this is enough, and now I'm going to come back on SmackDown, or I'm going to come back in Berlin.
But I also think part of why you feel that way is because you don't think, at least I don't think, Solo's really on that level yet.
No.
So, and as great as Jacob Fatu is, that's almost a hindrance too, because it's clear that this guy seems like a bigger threat and a more legitimate contender than the guy who everyone's calling the tribal chief.
Yeah, and assuming Jacob Fatu is okay, and that was him just selling that injury, you got to think he's going to have his eyes on LA Knight next. Like, you have to think that if they're going to continue down this path, and they've already got the tag titles back, well, why not? Why not just have him beat LA Knight and have the U.S. title in the group now too? I don't know, but it was what it was. It was an overbooked mess in a good way.
No, I do have to mention, because this is the first time I've seen this in a match, a Cody match at least, and maybe it happened in AEW. I didn't really follow his matches there, but I've never seen anyone counter his drop-down punch to the face move.
I'm sure it's happened, but it doesn't happen much.
It's such a non-factor of a move. It always works. I don't know.
Yeah, it's more of a taunt than it is a move, and It was an interesting story that they built early with, hey, Solo's done his homework, Solo. And it's just bad because, I could have told you, hey, watch out. When he drops down like that, you're going to get punched in the face. Yeah. Don't look down at him. But, there is some level of suspension of disbelief. I guess you have to go through there. But
it was good to see KO and Orton show up.
Yep. And, who's next for Cody? Because that's the question. Because I presume that Reigns is going to be tied up in bloodline stuff, not coming back after Cody yet. So, does Randy Orton, is he lined up next? Is it?
And that's great too, because you can just sit on that for a while, and then kind of like they did with Cody and Reigns this last time, where you kind of had them cross paths with each other, and you're like, wait, are they really still going to do Cody and Reigns at Mania? And ultimately they did, but that was kind of like the first time you thought, they didn't forget about that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have it again where at some point in time, whether it be like a Rumble or something, they're going to be in the ring eyeing each other, and you're like, we're going to see the next chapter of this, and I want to see it, actually.
Yeah, it does. It feels a little bit like Omega Okada when they were doing that right in New Japan, where it was like you kind of knew that they were going to do it again at some point, and when they did each time, it was really special, so... But yeah, Cody Rhodes gets the win. Roman Reigns is back, and more questions and answers come out of that segment, but we'll have to see where it goes. The semi-main event, more happenings. It was the world title that was previously held by Damian Priest. It is now held by Gunther. He wins the title in 16 minutes and 39 seconds. Obviously, maybe work rate wise, this might have been one of the matches of the night, maybe the match of the night. I don't know that Gunther can put on a bad match. I thought Damian Priest was really good here. And you had the kind of the fallout of what happened earlier in the night, which we'll get to after the break. But you have Finn Balor, who's put Gunther's foot on the ropes to save him in the match, and then
despite Gunther kicking him earlier.
Yes, it was clearly
further
not
setting the stage,
not to help Gunther, but to hurt Damian Priest. And then, of course, Priest is choked out, and that allows Gunther to get the win, and he's the world champion. And who knows how long he's going to hold that thing, because whoever it is that's going to be built to beat him, that's a ways down the road.
They may not be anywhere near the title picture, whoever's going to beat him ultimately.
I mean, you got to think someone like Braun Breaker may be in that conversation. And of course, he's not. They're not putting him up there yet to that level, but, I mean...
Depending on how long you want to go with it. I mean, obviously dragging off somebody, Dunn or Bate, or two people that can put on a good match with Gunther. Maybe you want to elevate them. Who's to say?
Yeah, there's a lot of options there, but Gunther looks like he's going to be a dominant champion. Really wild visuals of him bleeding from his chest and just almost irritated by it, and wiping it off and rubbing it in his hair, just so weird. But Priest looked great. And now it appears the Judgment Day as we know it is no more. Obviously, it started earlier in the night with the portrayal of Dominic Mysterio and allowing Liv Morgan to retain, which we'll talk about more after the break. But it ends with Finn Balor. And obviously, we don't know, presumably, where JD McDonough's lies as far as his allegiance. But you have to think it's probably with Balor. Is Balor and McDonough going to align with Mysterio and Liv Morgan? Are they going to do their own thing? I mean, it's, there's still a lot of questions to be answered there. But
the lead up would lead you to believe yes, just because there were numerous instances where Morgan was interacting with Balor that led to this, and when she vandalized their poster, his was the only face that wasn't messed with, like just little things like that.
Well, and I think if they can do it right and they can stretch it out long enough, I think there's a scenario where they could actually have Balor turn heel on Mysterio and actually set Dominic up for a face run on the other side. I think we're months away from that.
Yeah, I could see it being an ultimate end point.
There's a way to get there, I think. Not immediately, because people are going to hate Dominic even more because he turned on Mommy. But you know how now you have very clearly, Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley as baby faces.
Yeah. And you hope there's still some sort of collaboration there, because I feel like they work off each other really well. Like there's just some sort of camaraderie between the two that you enjoy.
And maybe they're going to need reinforcements for whatever their group is. Maybe they continue with the Judgment Day name and they just recruit new members, because they're going to need, who knows? It's hard to say where it's going to go, but the story of whatever's going to happen is beginning with this. And Gunther now will move into Berlin coming up in 4 weeks' time as the champion, and you've got some options. You could do him and Ilya Dragunov again, and that would be a wild match. Presumably, I can't say that. I would think that Cody probably won't defend on that show because they've been really hyping him up on this Atlanta show, which follows in October. So I could see a scenario where you have Gunther as the main event of the Berlin show and have just his world title being defended. So we'll see how that book, because typically these smaller PLEs are 5 matches, so that would make a lot of sense, I think. But
just a couple notes that I took on that match.
Yeah.
I was really glad that Priest did not attempt the step up to the second rope suicide dive that he got his leg caught on the last major event.
Yes.
The dude has an impressive enough arsenal of moves. Like, I don't think that adds anything besides just, he can fly too. To me, I'm just as impressed seeing him do any number of other moves, like a Hurricane Rana or even power moves. I mean, I like the South of Heaven. I like the Razor's Edge. His strikes are really good. I don't need that.
And I think these outdoor shows, even though it was an indoor show the last time he had an issue with it, it was a big crowd. An outdoor show in the humidity, because they tell you Cleveland couldn't have been much less humid than it was here.
Sure.
I think there's a risk there, so I think that's smart to not call that. And but no, I mean, overall, I think it was a really smartly wrestled match that at times made both guys look really good.
Yeah, and the other thing too I wanted to point out was I love how they set up the betrayal even more perfectly by when Gunther attacked Balor. Like, just how enraged that made Priest. Where it really bothered him that someone attacked Balor moments before Balor was going to betray him.
Yeah.
Like, it just sets you up even more for that, like, he's going to do it still, isn't he?
Well,
my God, what a son of a bitch.
And you mentioned, Solo Sikoa countering Cody's drop-down move. Damian Priest might have been the first wrestler in history that looked at the video board to see exactly what happened during a match.
The first time we've had replay in a match to that degree.
Because that's clearly what he did. That's how he knew. Because as he was laying, there would have been no way for him to know how his foot got on the rope.
Yeah.
But then, what a great camera shot, because they come back to live, and here's the shot behind Priest with the giant Jumbotron clearly showing the replay of what happened. Like,
is this another sports-based presentation moment where you have the star player looking up at the replay of what he just did?
100%.
Essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's just, it's also the really good production value to capture all that. And if you didn't notice, because obviously I notice a lot of these things, I think a lot of people don't, because I've been in TV production, so you kind of get a little different perspective on it. But go back and watch the introductions on the women's title match between Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. There's a shot of Rhea Ripley, and they're using the 8K cameras, so they have a very narrow depth of field. But you've got the shot of Ripley, like, posing. You've got the ring announcer. I can't remember if it was Samantha Irvin for that match or if it was Alicia Taylor. I can't remember who did that. Whoever it was, she was in the middle, and then you had Liv Morgan, like, facing the camera, just blank face stare.
Yeah.
Clearly stare. Like, it was a perfectly framed shot. And those are little things that probably for most people just kind of go in and out, and it doesn't register. But you get excited when you see that kind of stuff, because, I mean, directors are like, yeah, that's the look we're looking for.
It's a cinematic quality you don't find in any other wrestling company either. It just shows you the level at which WWE's production is that you can't really imitate that.
And they're trying the ref cams. I don't think they got as much live out of those tonight. I imagine we'll probably see some of the footage show up on their social media. And I think as it continues on, because that's another thing. If you want to use those shots live, you're going to have to train your officials to keep your head still, frame up the shot, like things that they're not normally thinking about in the midst of a match. You're going to have, hey, this is where this big spot's going to happen. I need you to follow the spot. And, even if you're a second getting down for the cover, I need you to, like, if he goes to the top rope, I want you to look up at him and then follow him. It's just stuff like that you would never have to consider are things that you're going to have to consider if this is going to work live.
Yeah. And I think also, even beyond the live aspect, it's let's just see what we can capture and what we can do on social media with this. Yeah. What kind of TikToks can we throw together or, Instagram reels using the ref's field of view of some ridiculous spot? Like, what is Logan Paul going to do through the eyes of the official? Like, that stuff could be huge.
Yeah, and, you're going to see, you wouldn't surprise me to see the ability to have wrestlers wear something like that at some point, too. Especially someone like Logan Paul, who's always thinking about those.
I mean, he's already done spots holding his cell phone, right?
Yeah, so, it's not really that much farther to do something like that. But I know we kind of got off tangent there, but just stuff that happened throughout
really happy
the night.
For Gunther.
Absolutely.
The man has worked his butt off and is finally really getting that billing he deserves.
He's the best professional wrestler in the world, and he now has a championship that basically says as much. And I don't think that would have happened under Vince. And like I said, who's going to beat him? Because I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think this is going to be another
dude's built for long title reigns.
He is. He's not going to wrestle a ton. He's going to wrestle as an attraction, which makes it special. I don't know what the current status of Brock Lesnar is with this company. Like, they have at least mentioned his name, so I don't think he's persona non grata. Yeah. That's a match that needs to happen. You need to do that match once. Yeah. I don't know how much money it's going to take to get Brock to do that, or if you want to wait until this whole Vince McMahon case is settled, make sure Brock's name doesn't show up anywhere else in there. But if you can, you need to do that match.
I gotta wonder how much more money you have to give Lesnar to agree to get his chest busted open with 50 chops, because it's a different animal wrestling Gunther compared to other wrestlers.
And I totally agree with that statement. And at the same time, Lesnar's such a different cat. Like, to me, because we've seen like what he's willing to do in matches with Cody, when you just think, everybody thinks he's hard to work with and all this, and here he is, selling his butt off and making Cody look like $1 million, and did the same thing for Roman when they had their big match, and you just wonder, like, for the opportunity to have that match, is Lesnar like, you know what, you write the check and I'll be there and we'll do this and we'll do it once.
With hindsight and all that, and knowing that Cody ultimately did finish the story, it really changes how you feel about the Lesnar feud he had, because it really felt like it built Cody even, like, before you thought it was a punishment. Like, man, he's never going to win the title now. Now he's having Lesnar just murder him regularly. But, man, that was such a huge thing. And eventually Lesnar putting him over and kind of getting that seal of approval from Brock, that was a big deal.
And the thing is, because it was Vince, it may have started out as a punishment or a way to, like, hey, Lesnar's a big deal, so we're going to have you wrestle Lesnar, but you're not going to be in the title picture. We're just giving you another guy to wrestle that'll get you near the end of a pay-per-view, but, you're not going to win the title. Clearly, with Vince out of the picture, it did turn out to be a great series of matches, and it did end up elevating him as it worked out, but I think they were a little fortunate that it kind of worked out that way.
For sure.
Let's talk about one more match before we go to the break. It was the third match from the end. It was Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk with Seth Rollins as special guest referee. And it was another wild affair. Seth Rollins let a lot of stuff go, finally decided he was going to draw the line in a couple places. And in the end, it was Drew McIntyre that got the win in 17 minutes flat. Basically, because CM Punk got too wrapped up in the bracelet, the storyline. He Rollins at one point picks the bracelet up and puts it on just to get it off the ring mat. Punk sees it and gets enraged. He ends up hitting Rollins with a go to sleep. Ends up eating a Claymore. Rollins comes to, counts a very legitimate 1, 2, 3, storms off. McIntyre wins, but puts the bracelet back on. So that tells you it's not over. And clearly it's not over between Punk and Rollins. I don't know where we're headed with this, but first off, it kind of felt like a big moment for Drew McIntyre to kind of get one in this feud, especially if it's going to continue. I think him getting the first one was kind of important so that, we can continue to build the rage amongst those three.
I think had Punk won, there would be a little bit of a finality to it that we're not ready for yet. My initial thought was, man, we're making such a big deal about that bracelet. But at the same time, I believe this is the first time I've ever seen jewelry land on the ring, like the ring canvas, and a referee grab it and put it on.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Usually you just kick it out of the ring. So
right.
The fact that obviously there is that built-in tension between Punk and Rollins, and then for whatever reason Rollins sees the bracelet and says, I'm going to wear it now.
Yeah.
It's goofy that it's a friendship bracelet. It's not, it's the symbolism is there, but it's not AJ and the dog. It's just a bracelet. But Punk's the kind of dude where if he thinks you're doing something just to try to get under his skin, it works.
Yeah, and it clearly did, and it clearly cost him. And overall, it was a solid match. I think Punk looked fine, his first singles match in WWE in over a decade.
I feel bad because I worry about him a little bit because he just when he starts selling things, you're like, man, I hope he really isn't hurt. And I probably shouldn't, but that's just how it is. He sold just extremely well, I guess. That's part of the issue.
And obviously, I don't think they'll run anything back in Berlin, probably, but again, you have Bad Blood coming up in October. Could be a spot for a Hell in a Cell. How many Hell in a Cell triple threat matches have they ever done?
That's a good question.
Because
I'm not sure.
I don't know. That's a good question for anybody listening out there. Could share that info, but that might be one of the few triple threat Hell in a Cell matches with those three guys. Basically, like Adam Pearce is like, look, we're gonna put you in this cell. You're gonna solve it and figure it out, and then we're gonna move on with our lives. And
it's really a perfect time to revive the Bad Blood name,
yeah,
because man, there are so many feuds right now that
Bad Blood,
legitimately serious feeling beefs that there's been a long time since you've had that many simultaneously, but I think they've done a really good job in kind of building these different stories, but all relevant.
And so many intertwining, which makes it even better because you can do more with less that way. But again, good writing means that everything feels important. Even a throwaway segment with Jelly Roll coming out to, attack Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. Like
the Rock and Roll Express.
Yes, the Rock and Roll Express, as R-Truth said. Even that, there's some feeling behind that as well. But definitely interested to see where this goes. It's clearly not over, because at first I thought it was just going to be over with McIntyre and Punk, and then he put the bracelet on. Like, nope, it's not over between those two. It's clearly not over with Rollins and both of them, because it wasn't like he was thrilled that he had to count the 3 for McIntyre, because he clearly stormed off afterward, and he didn't fast count, so it wasn't like he was cheating Punk either.
It's kind of an interesting twist to the story, because you felt like Rollins was really proud of himself for getting this referee gig. Like he was going to screw with both dudes and just have a blast doing it. But then by the end of the match, he was just as disgruntled and bitter as they were.
And yet still trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Like he was still trying to call the match fairly, even with all the nonsense going on, which, again, he's still technically a babyface, so that's why he had to act a certain way. But, man, there's that. It's going to be a wild ride. And again, this is a way for those three guys to be in a main event level feud without a main event level title.
It'll be interesting to see where it all ends up, because at some point, if we're going to keep Rollins as a face, he has to eventually come to terms with the fact that CM Punk being there isn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because he's still kind of using that same line that we've heard about CM Punk for a couple of years now. Like, we don't need you here. You're awful. You're the worst. You're a cancer.
Yeah.
At some point, as the baby face, he's got to be like, maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah, we'll see how long it takes to get there with the current WWE pace on their storytelling. It might be sometime in 2027, but
it'll be at his funeral.
Very possibly
delivering CM Punk's eulogy. He was all right to work with,
as it turned out. But
who knew?
Really interested to see where all that goes. So. That's the last 3 matches on the card. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, we're going to step aside for a break. We come back, just a quick segment talking about some other things going on in the WWE universe and specifically NXT and TNA working together and the continuing expansion of that relationship. Just some quick thoughts on that. And then we'll get to the last matches, which are actually the first matches on this card, on what was the biggest party of the summer, WWE Summerslam. We're recapping it here on the Nerdcast Empire, and we will continue doing that on the other side of this timeout here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, WWE SummerSlam recap. Matt and Mike with you this week. Chris and Rachel are on vacation. They'll be back with us soon. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to our previous podcast there. You can check out our store while you're there. A lot of great stuff there. Check out nerdcastempire.com. We will be back in less than 24 hours doing this once again. It's Music Weekly with music from July the 19th. Really good stuff on tap, and got to make some final picks of the music, but I really found some bands, I think, and you have as well, that are pretty solid this week, so really excited to see how that turns out. You can find out, too, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Sunday, which is about 12 minutes away from Sunday here on the East Coast, but definitely check that out. And then, of course, next Thursday we'll be back with another episode of Anime Thursdays. Don't know exactly what we're doing yet, but you'll have to tune in to find out next Thursday on the Nerdcast Empire. Before we get to the rest of this premium live event, did want to just kind of talk about one news item that really, because we haven't done any recaps of NXT premium live events, we haven't really talked about much, but I did want to kind of bring it up a little bit, and that is the beginning crossover between NXT and TNA Impact. We saw it originally with Jordynne Grace coming across to wrestle Roxanne Perez for the women's title. Perez ended up getting the win there, but that seemingly was just testing the waters, because since then we have gotten the phenomenon that is Joe Hendry, and he's actually looks like training full-time in the Performance Center now while continuing to work for TNA. We've got the Rascals showing up in NXT, and now MSK this week is going to get a title shot at the tag team titles that they never lost. And that'll be coming up on day 2 of the Great American Bash, coming up on Sci-Fi on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. But we've also seen people go the other direction as well. We've seen members of Gallus go to TNA television. We had a match taped tonight. Won't spoil the result. I haven't seen the results, so I couldn't spoil it. But supposedly we had Charlie Dempsey taking on Jonathan Gresham, which is...
That'll be a really strong match.
Absolutely. So we've seen some of the members of Chase U go across. We've seen Gallus show up there. So
Tatum Paxley, I think Jasmine Nix maybe too.
Both got title shots as well. And it's an interesting partnership that I think is just in its early stages, and they're clearly taking it slow and deliberate, but at the same time, I'm not afraid to kind of keep pushing it forward. Curious to get your thoughts, because I honestly, I think it's been a win-win for both companies so far.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think in order to see it that way, you kind of have to be objective and realistic about how or where TNA currently is. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to just say, okay, we have this partnership. We're going to have Moose wrestle for the World Heavyweight title and win it. Like, there's just no reason whatsoever to do that. I like Moose, but that's just not where TNA is in relation to WWE. It was cool to have Jordynne Grace in the Rumble and make a really strong showing, but they weren't going to have her win it. This allows them to essentially kind of help build each other. I mean, you have NXT making that move to the CW in a couple months. What better way to generate more buzz by having this other currently pretty small rating-wise and attendance-wise company work alongside with you, where you can basically kind of trade talent back and forth and prop each other up. It's just there doesn't have to be any steamrolling. The one company doesn't have to always go over the other company. It can be more of a partnership, and I think you can't do that if you see your company as the biggest company in the world. It takes an NXT. Like, SmackDown can't do that. And I think that's a lot of the reason why the partnership between TNA and AEW felt lopsided, because it wouldn't have made sense for AEW to just let TNA do whatever they wanted And conversely, it didn't help TNA to have AEW run all over them. So I think this is mutually beneficial. It's something that both can kind of build off of as opposed to one dominating the other.
And we're seeing a lot of TNA wins in this series right now. It's not like WWE's bringing all these people in and jobbing them out. Like, you've got Joe Hendry getting a pin in a main event involving Trick Williams. And you had, him had the concert. He had the concert this past week, and now he's going to wrestle Joe Coffey, who's good to the last drop, coming up on Tuesday night. They're doing it right. They're respecting the wrestlers from each company. They're giving them certainly, they're not letting all of them win or lose. It's kind of a good balance, but they're booking them just like they would be booking them if they were regular roster members. But it also allows WWE, if you have people in TNA that are clearly on the way up, they basically get a trial run in WWE. I mean, there's no question that when Jordynne Grace's contract is up, she is 100% coming to WWE and probably straight to the main roster now because she does have the Rumble appearance. She has had time on NXT television. She probably doesn't need more time in NXT. They could, but they probably won't. They'll probably just bring her straight into the Rumble and she'll kind of take off from there. You've got Joe Hendry, who is just a phenomenon right now. The whole thing is just wild. And eventually that dude's going to show up on Raw or SmackDown. And just so they can see, do people sing his song on Raw or SmackDown? And, they probably will because wrestling fans are crazy. And it's just wild. But I'm excited to see where it goes. It's been great to see the Rascals back. That was a crappy situation the way it all went down. And it's great that has not only been resolved, but now they're thriving in this situation. So I'm excited for it. I think it's kind of injected a little new life to NXT, which is already really good. But it's kind of new talent is just a little more excitement, gives people another reason to tune in. And I was reading a comment tonight because the TNA's been taping the last 2 nights in Tampa. Somebody who was a TNA fan was posting saying, like, hey, I've been talking to a bunch of the people who are here. Most of them are WWE fans who are at their first TNA taping that bought tickets for this because of this crossover. Like, it's not going to work in a flashy way. It's going to work in a very subtle way. Yeah. They're going to sell out these tapings.
Well, I think Slammiversary had good attendance.
And good buy rate as well. Like, it's not like all of a sudden TNA is going to be running 20,000-seat arenas, but they're going to be selling out. They're going to be getting more attention on social media. I mean, the Joe Hendry stuff has been on WWE's social media has been getting insane views. Those are views that are coming back to Impact, to TNA. Like, I think it's been great, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I think when they move to CW, I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. You never know what's going to happen in NXT.
Yeah, I think that's really the goal. Is it while it may not make as much sense on Raw or SmackDown, NXT is the perfect breeding ground for that. And as you move to network television, give people a reason to have to watch because you really have no idea what's going to happen next.
Yeah, if you're not watching NXT, you should be watching NXT. It is the best wrestling show every week. Even with improved Raw and SmackDown, NXT is still the one show each week that I don't want to miss. So definitely check that out. We'll talk more about this crossover as it continues on and more interesting things happen. Let's finish up our SummerSlam recap. We'll start with the opening match. We'll jump all the way back because it kind of ties up something we've already talked about. It was the women's world title match between Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley with Dominic Mysterio. And in the end, as we kind of predicted, Liv Morgan retains the world title thanks to Dominic Mysterio very clearly sliding a chair in for her to use. She hits Oblivion on the chair, gets the 1, 2, 3, and then they make out. So clearly, that was basically the first straw that fell for Judgment Day as he basically turned on Rhea Ripley. And you got some more nuclear heat on those two. And you've got Ripley, was already basically a babyface, but now very solidly positioned as a babyface without Mysterio there to get boos every time he shows up on screen. And again, between that and what happened with Damian Priest, lots of questions with the Judgment Day. But I think it was good that Liv Morgan retained, however it was going to happen, just because she does need to continue to establish herself as a champion. And presumably, as we talked about a moment ago with the Punk McIntyre Rollins thing, I guess we're going to get a gimmick match between those two, maybe Hell in a Cell, maybe at Bad Blood, maybe sooner, who knows. But I thought it was a really good opening match with even if it was a bit predictable, probably the right storyline in the end.
Yeah, I would agree. Even from early on in the match where you had Morgan like repeatedly leaving the ring to try to evade Ripley, I thought that was a really good way to start it out. Kind of the repeated re-injury thing that Rhea was doing where she would just so happen to like jam her shoulder and dislocate it and have to relocate it, doing that multiple times in the match, almost as if the shenanigans wouldn't be enough for Liv Morgan to beat her. She also had to deal with this potential re-injury thing multiple times. You knew it was going to happen. It was very predictable, but still enjoyable. And I'm glad that Morgan won. I think it's easy to overlook because the Judgment Day itself has been so good, but Morgan's character work lately with this character infiltrating Judgment Day and Dominic Mysterio has been great as well.
It was, I think, hard at first for them to find a heel character for her that made sense because she's so hot.
Yeah.
So everybody loves her. And
she's never going to be imposing or threatening to people.
Yeah, so it's like really your option then is to be manipulative, and she's found a way to do that. And honestly, like the injury to Ripley, which was obviously a freak accident with the chair in the hallway, it kind of worked because it kind of made her dangerous in some way, but not in a reckless way. So they were able to take something that was a real life oops and turn it into a real life storyline.
The other interesting thing about it is when you step back from this whole story, aren't Liv Morgan, Finn Balor, and Dominic Mysterio justified? Because didn't the Judgment Day like terrorize them originally, like right off the bat?
Yeah.
I mean, before Balor joined and Dominic joined, and then obviously Rhea made Liv's life pretty miserable before the injury. So it's almost like they kind of got what they deserved, even if now you have Priest and Ripley as faces.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be part of the explanation we'll hear when we get that this week on Raw, but or maybe even after the event of the post-match or post-event press conference going on right now as we record this. But I think there's certainly some justification there, and even in the midst of the storyline, there was justification because it felt like Priest was always the one kind of flying off the handle when things were going wrong.
He positioned himself as the leader, especially within Ripley's absence.
Yeah. And then Ripley, when she comes back, basically kind of co-signs the two of them as the leaders instead of like, why were you trying to be the leader? Like, clearly they were aligned together. And I think the story, it's going to be very interesting, but it's another long-term storyline that is kind of just getting started and kind of kicked into another gear on this event tonight. And I think that's something that they did a really good job of is not just changing titles, but, furthering drama that's going to make you want to tune into TV and the next Premium Live event and see how it shakes out.
It's really amazing, and I've mentioned it off the podcast multiple times, but I thought when they kicked Edge out of Judgment Day and Balor stepped in, I kind of assumed the group was dead in the water. Like, I didn't think they were going anywhere. And over the months and months, eventually they put themselves in a position where they were kind of one of the reasons you watched Raw. They were more or less carrying the program. And it's because of that, I actually kind of feel bad at what happened tonight, that we finally see it imploding.
Yeah, they did a phenomenal job of making you care about that group, and it really, credit to R-Truth for his short stint in there, Carlito in the more recent days, that having that comedy character that kind of helped push it along, but also kind of made the group more human and not just this evil entity that sometimes is hard to relate to.
You had this top faction in the company with a clubhouse where they're playing PS5 and they're having, nuggets delivered to Dominic because he eats chicken nuggets or whatever.
Well, I just contrast that to the Bloodline Roman Reigns era where you had they had their room, but it was like full of these.
It almost felt like a spoof of it. Yeah, it's like we have our own thing, and it's kind of sad and hilarious.
Yeah, as it turns out, that may have been what the goal was with that, but and then R-Truth bringing a TV in there and all that other stuff, but really interested to see where that goes, and obviously. I would not want Rhea Ripley mad at me. So
No, absolutely not.
I saw Buddy Matthews tweeted that like, "Hey Tony, can I like go help mommy out for a minute?" Like, dude, you just signed that new contract. Like, this was the perfect opportunity to bring you back.
Yeah, hope the money's worth it, man.
Yeah, which I'm sure it is.
It would have to be, because I would have thought that WWE would have given him a decent offer.
I would think so as well, but we'll see where this story goes. It's going to be very interesting. Continuing down the card, Intercontinental title match was match number 2, and really was kind of an extended squash match. In the end, Braun Breaker wins it in 5 minutes and 42 seconds. Not a shock that he won it. Kind of surprised that this is the way it went, but Breaker has been, they've elevated him in every way short of giving him a championship, and this was a way to do it by basically stomping Sami Zayn, who they've presented as an impressive champion, by having him beat Gunther and then kind of defend his title to all comers, and finally Breaker gets the win. And, you know, speaking of long title runs, this could be another lengthy Intercontinental title run because Breaker, I mean, he's the real deal for sure.
It's like they had to try to figure out who the bridge was going to be between Gunther and Breaker. Like, they weren't going to have Breaker beat Gunther in a decisive match, or probably at all, at least not yet. So they couldn't have him be the one to take it off Breaker, because they're probably going to save that for, you know, larger prizes, I assume. Sami Zayn's a good contender for that, because he's the wily veteran that you can basically almost reenact Breaker's NXT title where he lost the first match to, was it Dolph Ziggler?
Maybe. Might have been. I can't remember, but that sounds right.
Where they kind of had him like he made a mistake and you know how it was, or was it Ciampa maybe? I don't remember. That's not super important at the moment, but they kind of made it look like his inexperience cost him the first time, and then the second time he got the job done. I kind of still feel bad that it wasn't originally Gable that beat Gunther, because I thought that would have been the more satisfying match at that point in time. But yeah, Braun Breaker's a monster. I think the sky's the limit for him for sure. I'll be anxious to see how long they have him at this level before they decide to go ahead and move him to a world title feud of some sort. But yeah, this was kind of a beatdown.
Yeah, and not a big shock there, and great that his dad and his uncle were there, the Steiner brothers, and that was cool. And
Sean Waltman.
And Kevin Nash. And
DDP.
And Jacqueline, I think, was there as well. So that was kind of cool to see. But yeah, really impressive. Braun Breaker, a big star already. And for Sami Zayn, like, do they slow burn him up to face Gunther for the world title maybe sometime next year? Because, I mean,
there's the built-in story that I'm the only dude that can beat you.
Yeah, and it just feels like Sami Zayn's a dude that needs to win a world title before he hangs it up in WWE. And,
he deserves it, I think.
And, you know, I think there's a story to be told there. He's probably going to have to wade through a bunch of bloodline nonsense first, because I have a feeling he's about to get pulled back into the bloodline vortex.
He could even be the catalyst that mends the whole bloodline, where essentially, you know, Roman's able to reach out to him, and he's the one that then has to convince the Usos to jump on board. I could see that.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, actually. So it'll be interesting, because then you're also going to have people like Kevin Owens who are going to go to Sami and be like, "Why are you talking to Roman? Because I hate that guy. He ruined my life." And, you know, so again, there's layers upon layers.
A lot of drama there.
It's going to be very interesting to see how it all shakes out. Speaking of drama, we had the U.S. title match next. We had Logan Paul in his home city of Cleveland, basically getting booed out of the building with MGK.
Even Cleveland people hate Cleveland people.
That's very true. Except for the Miz, he got great cheers all night.
Miz is beloved
everywhere,
worldwide.
MGK, we did not. Kevin Owens was in the building. I certainly, we missed.
How'd they keep them apart?
That's a great question, but it was the Logan Paul versus LA Knight. In the end, after a bunch of shenanigans and impressive moves again, LA Knight able to avoid the buckshot lariat, hitting the blunt force trauma to win in 12:03, plus about 4 or 5 minutes of pre-bell activity, which was kind of weird. But in the end, more athleticism from Logan Paul, just a ridiculous moonsault where he jumped up.
The reverse springboard moonsault or
Like-
something like that. I think that was how I tried to describe it.
Like, I feel like that dude goes to the Performance Center and is just like, all right, I'm going to give me an idea. Spitball some ideas of just the most nonsense moves you think anybody would try, and I'm going to try it enough until I can learn it, and then I'm going to use it in these big matches because he's always coming up with something that is just a freaky athletic move.
His flip over the top rope on that attempted buckshot lariat was the most violent, vicious-looking thing I've ever seen.
It looked like he was going to kill LA Knight with that flip.
Or injure himself on the landing. Like, that was just, like, the velocity he had was just next level.
Yeah. And, certainly he didn't defend the title much, which he's probably never going to be that kind of champion. He's always going to be the guy that shows up a couple times and defends it because when you're a celebrity, that's what you do. But now you have the title on LA Knight. Now's a chance for him to kind of make his legacy because right now he's over, no question. But, a lot of it is the catchphrases and the yes and the music and all that stuff. Like, now's a chance for him to maybe build a legacy in WWE is, hey, he's also a pretty solid wrestler and he can put on good matches and he's going to defend this title probably against anybody and everybody. So it's a good chance for him to build a good title reign. Probably won't be, we're not talking Gunther level title reign here, but I think, I think 6 months of him defending it fairly regularly on television and premium live events will be a good chance for him to solidify his status as a upper mid card to lower main card guy.
I think this match was a good example of showing that Knight can be an above average worker. I don't know if it just when you wrestle Logan Paul, if you have any idea at all about what you want to do, he signs off on it. Like, yeah, man, let's do that, sure. But we saw LA Knight do some really cool things. That superplex, it was almost like a brain buster. He did like the jump from the second turnbuckle to the top turnbuckle and then jump off. I mean, the guy definitely can go. It's funny, over the years we've talked about so many people who WWE has dropped the ball with. This is the weirdest example of one where they dropped the ball and then magically picked it back up and ran with it. You don't see that very often where they get that next chance to not screw it up. But LA Knight's a star and the dude can go.
Chelsea Green is another one.
Yeah.
Where they messed up with her and they figured it out and they brought her back. Now, she hasn't been a champion, a singles champion yet.
But her work on TV is top notch.
Top notch. She's must see. She to me is right alongside R-Truth as somebody when they're on my television. I'm going to watch whatever they're doing because it's going to be the most interesting things. But you're right. LA Knight became a manager because Vince didn't think he could wrestle and he was too old and basically was out the door. And they bring him back. And, now he's a champion. And, so it's crazy how that's worked. And I don't think he'll be the last guy like that. There's going to be other guys that Vince dropped the ball on that, whether they're in AEW right now, whether they're in the independents, I think they're going to be in WWE, and I think they're going to do well. I mean, there's some of these guys in the bloodline who Vince may never sign, whether it was Guerrillas of Destiny, whether it was Jacob Fatu, and they're thriving now. So they're in main event storylines. They're champions. It's wild, but that's why WWE's product is so good right now. It's so much fun. There's so many people getting the shot. Even, and I didn't even write any notes about this, but even the stupid advertisement for Manscaped.
That was hilarious.
Was so funny because it's like starts out with Apollo Crews and Baron Corbin, and they're just, shaving Apollo Crews' head, and in comes Otis and Maxine and Akira Tozawa, and Otis looks like he's going to, use it in an inappropriate area on television, and it ends up he's just shaving his belly.
Yeah.
And it's just,
everything about Otis, you can't help but laugh at. Just his whole presentation, his facial expressions.
It's so perfect.
It's amazing.
He's another guy who's just so incredibly entertaining. That whole segment, I'm just crying, laughing. It's like, that's so brilliant. And it got all those guys on television. And,
I still don't understand how they didn't make the Maximum Male models work because I feel like it's that same kind of energy. It's that kind of humor that there's always a place for. Some people won't get it, but I think it's you could have done something with it.
Well, and to a lesser degree, I'm hoping that maybe the fact that LA Knight talked to Pretty Deadly last night on his rant, his run back through the back, is a sign that we're going to see more of them on television because they're very entertaining as well. And I saw somebody point out, I guess one of the events today was some sort of auction and they were involved, but Tyler Breeze was also involved. So it's like you had those guys all together in the same place, and it's like
they're basically like his children essentially as far as their characters.
So it's like, why would we not just try to do this if there's any interest? So we'll see. But that, it was just another thing that was just really entertaining. That was just an ad on the program, which was kind of crazy. And there were ads everywhere. If you are not a fan of ads, you probably did not enjoy that event because they were on the ring apron, they were on the ring canvas, they were on the jumbo boards. Probably need to talk to some of these companies like, hey, we need to make these colors a little more subtle because that Straight Talk Wireless was like this.
The neon green, maybe you don't go with.
Yeah, that was a little bright, but overall, it's kind of the way of the world, I guess. Last match on the card, and we'll wrap this up, was the middle match on the event, Bayley versus Nia Jax. Overall, I thought it was a good match. I still think this is Nia Jax's best run with the company.
Yeah.
And she's rewarded as she wins the world title after Tiffany Stratton comes out and distracts Bayley as she sort of kind of attempts to cash in, but not really. And Nia Jax hits the Annihilator twice or three times and gets the win and gets the world title. And now you have her as the champion. You have Tiffany Stratton with the Money in the Bank briefcase. They're aligned. So I don't know what's going to happen there. Probably hilarity for a little while. Probably will eventually involve Tiffany Stratton turning babyface when she does cash in on Nia Jax. But, I'm happy for Nia Jax because I do think she's someone who clearly took her time away seriously and got in better shape. And she's come back and she's been You need bad guys in women's wrestling. Sometimes they're hard to come by, and she's been authentically a bad guy that's worked, and because of that, she gets rewarded and will get some time on top. And like I said, I thought the match was very solid.
Yeah, I thought so too. My initial thought going into the match was, I'm sure this will be fine, but probably not too memorable. But there were some moments there that I'm probably gonna take with me. Bayley being able to pull off that power bomb with Nia Jax off the second rope. I did not think she had that in her. That was really something. Nia Jax doing the rolling senton. Never seen her do one of those before. They did a really good job of making Jax just seem like a monster. I mean, the multiple bonsai drop annihilators that she hit to just decimate Bayley by the end of the match. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what's next for Bayley. I kind of thought they were running out of things to do with her as champion at the moment, whereas I think there's a better story to be told between Jax and Stratton. It'd be kind of interesting if Bayley just maybe went away for a little bit and then maybe showed up on the premiere episode of NXT.
Yeah, maybe.
On the CW. I mean, I don't know what they would have her do necessarily, but that wouldn't be bad to have her go away for a little bit from Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah, potentially. I think, that's something in the current WWE that I think they've done a better job of is sometimes people just disappear for a little bit once they've lost a big match. And so you kind of miss them and then you bring them back and there's something to do with them again.
And you can do that in a way that doesn't feel like a punishment.
Yeah.
Like it's not being sent down as much as it is being sent over to kind of, it's going to you're going to do it to try to jump NXT's number a bit, but it does allow for some fresh matchups, especially while you do this TNA crossover thing. It could be interesting.
Yeah, it could be. It'd be interesting to see what they do with Bayley, whether she may be in line for a rematch even with Nia Jax. So, I mean, that's also potentially... Because obviously, again, you start thinking about what that Berlin card is going to look like in 4 weeks. So you don't have a whole lot of time. You know or think that Gunther is going to defend the world title there. So that gives you one match. And then the other 4 we'll have to see how those fall. But
what's Kaiser doing? Is he injured?
I saw he is injured. I did see that he's on track to maybe come back for that event. So that's a possibility that he comes back, maybe him and Vinci. I don't know where Vinci is right now. He's kind of in the void.
Yeah.
But, that's certainly a possibility if he's healthy and ready to go. If not, you could even do Dragunov potentially. Or
even set him up for a mid-card title shot.
Yeah, you could have him face Breaker as an Intercontinental title match. But, there's... You don't have a whole lot of matches, so you may get a couple rematches on that card. Again, because you only have 4 weeks to build it, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. But overall, I think thumbs up for SummerSlam. It was a good card. It was 7 matches in 4 hours with a Jelly Roll concert at the beginning, which was non-offensive. That's generally how I like my music on PLEs. If they can't get a rock or metal band, then just give me somebody that I'm not going to want to, stick sharp objects in my ears and make my ears bleed so I don't have to hear it.
Yeah, for sure.
So certainly got the job done tonight. That is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Nerdcast Empire. We thank everyone for joining us at this late hour. Big thanks to Mike as well for sitting in the studio, just the two of us tonight, but we'll continue to hold down the fort while everybody's on vacation, and we're going to do that again in less than 24 hours time with Music Weekly coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern time as it stands tonight. So we're actually into Sunday, so tonight 7 o'clock Eastern time, Music Weekly, the music of July the 19th. Really looking forward to that once again. A big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to everybody for joining us. If you've made it this far, drop us a follow. Make sure you check out our previous podcasts. We really appreciate the support. A big thanks to everybody for joining us once again. That's going to wrap things up for another premium live event recap here on the Nerdcast Empire. For Mike and the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.